We have a right to defend ourselves against our own government. If you disarm the populace, you give ultimate power to the government to control you, and they will take advantage of it. I'm Shane Corey, and this is episode 8 of Independent Citizen. Gun control legislation is coming. It's already here. Democrats have introduced 2 bills, which that was their entire agenda coming into office. It always really is, to restrict our gun rights in some way, or the ability to purchase or transfer or own, whether it's magazines, certain firearms, what have you. Just within the last 2 weeks, it has now turned into, in the eyes of the leftist media, along with Democrats, an emergency situation that we have to deal with immediately. Joe Biden is pushing this, and they're going to pass these bills. 2 of them already passed the House, and I doubt they'll be modified too much, but I expect more to come. That would be an all-out assault weapons ban like we had in 1994. The reason for that is mass shootings. Just a week ago, there was a shooting in Atlanta, which I'm sure you guys heard about, the massage parlor shootings, where 21-year-old white male went into massage parlors, took the lives of 8 people. And then again this week, there was another one in Boulder, Colorado. Again, another 21-year-old male went into a grocery store with an AR-15 pistol and took the lives of 10 people. Absolutely tragic. But, and I hate saying but to the deaths of 18 people that were absolutely unnecessary. But it is a but, because what's happening is you have everybody from former President Obama to the current president to the media, everybody else moving forward false narratives to push this agenda. So that's really what I want to discuss today. It's not about gun control legislation. Everybody's talking about this. It's the false narratives that are driving the gun legislation, pretty much any legislation. And I'm going to give a pretty good example of that. So let's start with Atlanta. Robert Long was a 21-year-old male that after the shooting, it was all over the news that he was targeting Asians and went in specifically to Asian massage parlors to kill Asian people. I was on Instagram this morning, and I was flooded with advocacy to stop Asian hate, and it was a result of these shootings. So they're pushing this agenda. I believe there's congressional hearings just a few days ago on this, and trying to tie this horrible act by a kid with a gun to racism and hate against Asian Americans. Well, that wasn't the case. That's a false narrative. The reality is he was a fanatical Christian with a sex addiction, and these massage parlors that just happened to be staffed by Asian women, which is a whole different story with the human trafficking of Asians to come and work in these basically brothels. He went in and just snapped and shot the staff in these massage parlors that, again, just happen to be Asian massage parlors, which are all over the nation. The owner of the Patriots, if you guys recall, was arrested and charged with visiting an Asian massage parlor in Florida. They're kind of the dirty secret of America in I'd say probably suburban areas more so, and that you can drive up to pretty much a strip mall in any city in America and find one where it's advertised as a massage parlor, but there's not much massaging going on there. Or, well, I won't get into that. Robert Long did not go in and kill people because he hated Asian Americans. That is absolutely false. Yet, that's the narrative that the media and Democrats will run with. A week later, roughly, Ahmad Alisi, a Syrian immigrant, came to the United States at a very young age, was 21 years old. 6 days prior, had bought a Ruger AR pistol, walked into, and this is the narrative from the media, a grocery store, killed 10 people. After the shooting, you see the photos of him, being in handcuffs, in his underwear, blood running down his leg, and you think, white guy, racism, went in, shot a lot of people. Even President Obama jumped on that bandwagon and blamed hate and racism for the shooting. Well, there was hate, but not in the box that the Democrats would prefer, which is white supremacy and racism and all that. Ahmaud was anti-Semitic. Lots of posts on social media where he made his hatred of Jews very evident, complained of being hacked by Islamophobes. And the grocery store was not just a grocery store, it was a Hasidic grocery store. And it happened on Passover. And it wasn't the only one. This was kind of, I wouldn't say organized. There's no evidence of that just yet. But if you do a little bit of research, you see that it's not, it wasn't an uncommon occurrence, not specifically at that time, but for shootings to occur in Jewish grocery stores. It was kind of an MO of ISIS. Best way to kill Jews is, where they congregate out, when they're doing their daily shopping. That's exactly what happened with Ahmaud Alisi in Boulder, Colorado. That's why 10 people are dead. It is not, again, that nice box Democrats and the leftist media would like. So they're just kind of brushing that under so that we don't notice. We just see the mugshot on TV that looks like a white guy with messed up hair, but really not getting into his background. You really don't see his name posted a lot. You just see on CNN the mugshot, 10 dead, 10 shot in a grocery store with an AR-15. Hate. False narrative. So that tie-in between Robert Long in Atlanta and Alisi in Boulder, Colorado is, especially in this day and age, when you tie anything to racism, there's not a reasonable defense against it. You can't go and defend racists in this day and age. It is not acceptable to say what I believe, which is, while I have no respect for racism, I have no respect for racists, but I respect their right to free speech. People have a right to be racist. People and people have a right to be ignorant. People have rights to do lots of things, and it is not something that can be legislated away. It just creates more of a backlash. However, can't really say that. So, as a way to push through any legislation in a way that cannot be disputed is to tie something to racism, to tie something to hatred, even if it is a false narrative. So let's back up to 1998 in, I believe it was Laramie, Wyoming. Matthew Shepard. Matthew Shepard was brutally beaten, tied to, I think it was a barbed wire fence, and left for dead in the cold of Wyoming. And he died. That spurred among the LGBTQ community an outrage, and what was a 11-year fight that resulted in the passing and signing of the Hate Crimes Prevention Act. That's why we have increased punishment for what is considered a hate crime. Matthew Shepard, for that 11 years at least, actually it was 13 years, was touted as a hero, a pioneer. I believe he was actually inducted in some kind of Hall of Fame for, and it's not fair to say he sacrificed his life. He was killed, and it was brutal. But the narrative by the media that lasted that long was he was beaten to death because he was gay. He was beaten by these redneck homophobes that just met him in a bar, saw he was gay, took him out, and beat him to death. Again, not true. There was an author, Stephen Jimenez, who went in and he wanted to tell the story of Matthew Shepard. He was a credible journalist, still is, and producer. He investigated the murder of Matthew Shepard for 13 years, interviewed over 100 relatives and people that knew Matthew Shepard. And as he was conducting that investigation, the narrative changed on him in an unexpected way. And that Matthew Shepard was not murdered because he was gay. What didn't even come out in court was one of his own killers, Aaron McKinney, knew Matthew Shepard. Both of them had prostituted themselves as gay male prostitutes, was an occasional lover of Matthew Shepard. That never came out in court. So one of Matthew Shepard's own killers, Aaron McKinney, was gay or bisexual. So, okay. So is it still a hate crime? Did a gay or bisexual guy hate another gay guy and kill him? Is that a hate crime? I don't know. I personally hate crime legislation is wrong, and I can get deeper into that. However, the reason why that passed was false. Here's why, and this is according to Stephen Jimenez and the work that he did, and it's the name of the book is The Book of Matt. I'd recommend it. It was very well researched and created an outrage in the LGBTQ community because it told a different story. It told the real secret reason why Matthew Shepard was killed. It's because he was a meth addict and a meth dealer, dabbled in heroin, and had gotten a big shipment in, I think $10,000 worth of crystal meth that Aaron McKinney and the other killer became aware of, and they were going to rob Matthew Shepard. And that's exactly what they did. They went and beat him to death, with or without the intent of, killing him, strapping him to a fence in Wyoming in the cold. You can assume somebody's going to die. But they went back to his residence and robbed him. And none of that came out in court. So again, it was all about these redneck homophobes beating this young man to death. And tragic that he was beaten to death. But the real reason was something that occurs every day in America is let's say a drug deal gone bad. It had to do with illegal drugs and not hate, not homophobia, not racism. It was a underworld drug transaction that ended up in a death, which occurs in inner cities every single day. So, but that did not stop Congress and President Obama from passing and signing the Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009. And that's why we have increased penalties for any act of hate, which is an ambiguous way to convict somebody and sentence them to far greater terms. Anyway, so you see how we can have something twisted so severely by even the courts, the media, by politicians, to result in something that was not necessary, that if the narrative were true, would it still be necessary? In my eyes, no. But it creates a compelling story and a compelling reason and a sense of urgency to pass something. And we're seeing it again because of Asian massage parlors and a 21-year-old going into a grocery store with an AR-15. Those narratives, which are muddled and twisted by the media into hate against Asians or just, guy with a gun, crazy guy with a gun, got to stop him. That is going to result in a suppression of our Second Amendment rights. Fair? No. Tragic? Yes. But it's a reason to dive deeper into the reasoning and look into why things pass and the hysteria created around these events. And you can always guarantee that if there's a tragedy, there's a politician willing to exploit it. And that's the screwed up thing about all this. This is why we need to elect better leaders that have integrity, that are willing to say, sorry, but this kid in Atlanta didn't hate Asian people. He had many other issues, but racism against Asians was not one of them. That is, when you start with a lack of integrity, you lose the entire debate. But unfortunately, we just go along with that in the media, go along with it with our politicians, and boom, we have our Second Amendment rights stripped. We have hate crime legislation. We have, you name it. So that's something to just be aware of. Keep an eye on it. Expect a new assault weapons ban. And my recommendation as a proponent of the Second Amendment, I believe, I'm hearing it more, but before, years ago, people weren't willing to say the real reason why we need the Second Amendment. And the reason is we have a right to defend ourselves against our own government. That's not a militant statement. That's something the founding fathers recognized, in that if you disarm the populace, you give ultimate power to the government to control you. It's that simple. And they will take advantage of it. Absolutely. So in 1994, when Bill Clinton signed the assault weapons ban, thank God it had its sunset. Expired in 10 years, would have to be renewed. It was not renewed. But during that period of time, you could not buy, they're referred to as black rifles still today. AR-15s are assault rifles, assault weapons. And I'm not, that was, actually, I was young, but not that young. So I don't know the details. But the assault weapons bans that are proposed, for instance, in California, and law in California, I believe there's one in New York as well, go further. So anything with a bayonet lug, anything with a detachable magazine is considered an assault rifle, which is ridiculous. So, but the point of that 1994 legislation was not a ban on possession. It was a ban on purchasing. Even replacement parts that were considered the rifle portion. So people could hold on to their AR-15s, but they could not purchase or, I believe, transfer that AR-15 during that 10-year period. So my recommendation, because look, they have the false narrative, they have racism, they have hate, they have everything driving this agenda. And right now, the two bills that have passed the House that will likely pass the Senate and be signed by Joe Biden only deal with a few things like one, for instance, is giving the FBI more time to run names through the NICS database, the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. So right now, it's just a few days, I think up to 5 days that they have to run your name through the federal database, through NICS. If they fail to come back with an answer within that time frame, the seller of the firearm can choose to continue to go forward with the transaction and sell you that gun. Their choice. This new legislation extends that. If you count, it's going to be business days. So it comes down to about 20 days that the FBI can take to run your name. So that's problematic in a lot of ways, in that it's no longer an instant criminal background check system. So it is going to, we can expect it to slow gun sales significantly, I would predict. I know that whenever I go and purchase a firearm, mine is always delayed. And it's not because of my involvement in politics. I was told by several gun shop owners that anybody that was a veteran that had any kind of security clearance always gets at least a 24-hour delay. I don't know why that is, but it always happens with me. I can't just go into a store, pass a background check, and walk out with a firearm that I purchased. I have to purchase it, go home, wait for the phone call, go back, eventually pass, do that. But what's happened recently, and this ties into the danger of expanding this check time. I have issues with the background checks in one major way, which I'll get to in a minute. However, let's discuss this. So in at least 2 cases that I'm aware of, people I know, James O'Keefe is one of them with Project Veritas, ended up in the NICS database. James is squeaky clean, literal Boy Scout, Eagle Scout. No reason whatsoever he should have been in the NICS database. However, he was. He had to sue to get off of it. Same thing happened with Laura Loomer. And Laura, again, she's a close friend. At her request, I ran her background check for her, saw for myself, like she doesn't have a speeding ticket. So again, she is somehow in the NICS database. And so and that happened in 2019, and just out of curiosity, I started monitoring the denials by the FBI. So they publish a report once a month of the total number of people that have been denied because they fit within 12 categories in the NICS database. Now, there's only 11 reasons why you can get denied. Convicted of a crime with a sentence of more than 1 year, domestic violence, adjudicated mentally unfit, drugs. So those 11 reasons you can look them up. But there's a 12th category for denials. And there's not many names in that. Not many denials have taken place in a long time. I think it's around 7,000 or so. But it is called the Federally Denied Persons File. It is not disclosed. It is not, that file is separate from the total number in the NICS database, which, by the way, 7% of total Americans, 7% of the American population, man, woman, child, is in the NICS database. 7%. That's crazy. So this Federally Denied Persons File, in this is an assumption, and this is something that Laura Loomer is going to be fighting in court to expose how somebody ends up in that file. But our assumption is if you upset the power structure, in Laura's case, she confronted former FBI Director James Comey.
Okay, thank you for submitting these questions. You have awful handwriting.
Hey, Mr. Comey, hey, how is it ethical to brief the President of the United States on an unverifiable and salacious dossier? And how is it ethical leadership to not tell him that his political opposition, Hillary Clinton, paid for that? You didn't disclose that information. Why didn't you disclose to President Trump that his opposition paid for the material? You are not an ethical leader. Today, Mr. Comey, 11 lawmakers, Mr. Comey, today filed a criminal referral against you.
Ma'am, you're going to have to leave. You gotta leave.
You're going to get prosecuted, Comey. You're going to get locked up.
Let's go, ma'am.
And when she went to go get her concealed carry permit, she was denied. James O'Keefe, he's upset a lot of people. So if you basically speak truth to power, if you upset, let's just call it the deep state, the bureaucrats, that would include James Comey, you can end up in the NICS database, which is so blatantly unconstitutional. It's bad. So why that matters to this bill that's passed in the House. If you give the FBI more time to collect data on you, to go through your social media account, call up friends, neighbors, maybe you kicked your neighbor's dog and upset him, there's a possibility that you can be denied as the FBI increases this file. Keep in mind, the FBI, it's not, unfortunately, especially under the Trump years, we've labeled them as bad guys. They're just people doing their jobs. They're career government employees, and the people in charge of the NICS database, their job is to put more and more people on that list. So in the case of Ahmad Alisi, the 21-year-old that went into the Jewish grocery store in Boulder, Colorado, and took the lives of 10 people, 6 days before the shooting, he went into a gun store, purchased an AR-15 pistol, a Ruger, obviously passed the background check, was not in the NICS database, despite having been under investigation and or surveillance by the FBI in the past, which is, by the way, one of the categories under investigation or indictment. That's one of the reasons for denial. So that is a failure of legislation and law that is already on the books. That is a failure of our government bureaucracy. It's a failure of our government that Alisi was allowed to purchase and possess a firearm. We don't need laws, new laws to stop another Ahmad Alisi. We need to do a damn better job with the laws that exist already. It's that simple. But nobody's going to talk about that. Nobody's going to admit that. 100,000 people in February of 2021, last month, were added to the NICS database. So it's not like they're slacking off. 100,000 people were added to that. Ahmad Alisi was not one of them. That says it all. So, my final recommendation, the assault weapons ban is coming. Even if you don't have a reason to go out and buy an assault rifle, which is not even the right term for it, if you want to go out and buy a cool gun that's fun to shoot, easy to learn, great for just going out and learning marksmanship, and also a great defense weapon, not necessarily in your home, but I think all Americans should own an AR-15 or even an AK, just because it puts power in your hands. Not that you have an intent to go out and commit violence. It's a way to maintain vigilance and defense against your own government by possessing a firearm. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. If you have no other reason whatsoever to own a firearm like that, that's why you should. So if you don't have one, go out and get one if you can. Probably going to have a hard time. Definitely going to have a hard time getting any .223 ammo. That's for sure. Or you can go out and you can make one. Cody Wilson, who we're going to have on the show soon enough, created this machine called the Ghost Gunner, which is basically a CNC machine where you can go and take what's called an 80% lower, which is it's 80% complete. And according to ATF rules, if you complete the remaining 20% yourself, you don't have to register it. It's called a ghost gun. It's off the books. Nobody knows you have it. Although they are rating 80% lower shops that sell them and taking their customer lists. So that's another option for folks. That machine is expensive. There's other ways to do it at home. But I would recommend you do it because I don't believe they're going to have a ban on possession of AR-15s. That would be disastrous for Democrats. That's why they couldn't do it in 1994. So it's not going to be any kind of retroactive thing where they come and confiscate your firearms, but you're not going to be able to purchase one for at least 10 years. If not, they may get away with not even having a sunset period in it, but let's just assume that's going to be the case. So go out and do that. The false narratives have been created. It's something that Republicans don't have the power to stop. And it is going to make a big impact in the 2022 midterm elections. But, people have short-term memories, so they may forget that they had their gun rights stripped by the time that comes. Anyway, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for listening to me babble on a little bit. We'll be back soon with another episode. We'll get into some more things. I would like to explore the human trafficking element, especially tied to these Asian massage parlors. It's really interesting and gets into more false narratives created by the media, but the refusal to address the real problem. So thanks again for watching. Subscribe, like, share, and thanks again.